Okay, I'm rolling. I'm ready for you whenever you're ready to go. Welcome.
Hello everyone. Today we'll be talking about the U.S. trade dispute between the global industry. I have a worksheet for all of you today to follow along with some of our research and some of our findings. So we will conduct that now. Alright, as Caleb's passing that out, I'll go ahead and get started. Alright, the basic background on tariffs. Tariffs are usually used to either help with the fund the federal budget or to sometimes fight unemployment. Sometimes when unemployment gets a little too high, tariffs could bring grow business to the U.S. and ultimately bring jobs to domestic companies. On March 8th, the President issued proclamations 9,704 and 9,705, which are the tariff, and because of NAFTA, he has exempt Mexico and Canada. Trump has spoken on NAFTA. He's not a big fan of it. He didn't want to exempt Mexico and Canada, but he ultimately did. What we're going to see is maybe some of the other countries maybe shipping through Canada and Mexico, maybe to try to get around the tariff, or also maybe preparing all of their, instead of making raw materials, they'll turn it into a finished product and ship to the U.S. Alright, what we've seen in the history of the tariffs is they've proven to be ineffective. In 2002, George Bush tried this tariff before, the similar tariff to what Trump has imposed. It proven to be ineffective, and what we actually saw was, this is a graph of employment between 2000 and 2005. Employment went down. What happened was jobs, actually we took a bigger hit in the consumer side of steel than we did the producers. Going to the next slide. Talk a little bit about who's going to get hit. Trump thinks that the American industrial base is getting taken advantage of. He thinks since we're an outflowing economy, or we're an inflowing economy, China's an outflowing economy, so we make a lot of our products in America from what we're not shipping over from companies like China, or from countries like China, which is why there's a lot of argument with China, because they're shipping a lot of their raw materials over to the U.S., which is why it's just between us and China, not as much the European countries. What we're going to see is consumers are going to get killed, the producers are going to love it in areas like West Virginia and Ohio, where all the steel is being produced in America, and then the farmers, other smaller companies over in toward the West Coast are going to take the big hit because they're ultimately paying higher prices. Going to the next slide. What we're going to see is steel workers. Steel workers are the ones that are making the money in the U.S. I think Trump's hoping that the producers are going to get helped when the consumers are going to get hurt. I think that's what his goal is. And then hopefully by having more jobs in producers, it'll compensate the jobs that are going to be lost in consumers. And that's what all the consumers are worried about. You can see that they have no choice with this tariff. They either accept it or everyone's going to lose their jobs. So hopefully more jobs are brought to the producers than those lost in consumers.
So what will be the impact on U.S. consumers? There will be a higher cost for common goods, which are produced with steel and aluminum, which are purchased by the U.S. citizens. So production costs will be affected, and then higher prices will be have to pay by the consumers. So theoretically, Americans will probably purchase fewer goods. And similarly to the 2002 Bush tariffs, which cost 200,000 jobs in the U.S., Trump tariffs could also have a similar impact on job numbers as well. So this could decrease the purchasing power of U.S. consumers as well. And the beverage industry could suffer as well due to the aluminum tariffs and the production with the aluminum for canned goods and drinks. So, and how will U.S. farmers be affected? We believe that they're going to be affected the most because farmers utilize steel-based appliances and tools every day in the industry, as it is highly mechanized, such as tractors and other devices that they use. So, and Europe and China either have or will impose counter tariffs on U.S. agricultural exports, or they will look to other trade partners, which will minimize the exports that U.S. farmers will export. And then also interestingly, the U.S. has a 21 billion trade surplus in the agricultural trade, but they lack success in similar or like other areas, as we have a 566 billion trade deficit with the world in general. And another thing to keep in mind is that politically, rural areas are mostly in the South Republican, so this could hurt the Republican base and Trump's supporting group, and so it could hurt his popularity in the upcoming elections and future political matters.
We would like to discuss some of the responses from political leaders around the world. Political leaders have had a wide array of responses to the installation of the tariff. Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe is one of them. The Japanese have taken the tariff as a target. Shinzo Abe feels that Trump's efforts have ultimately undermined global security. So the Japanese at the moment in time are a little bit uneasy about the installation of the tariff. Next up we have Diego Bonomo, Brazil being the second largest exporter of steel to the United States, which is extremely significant in the big picture. Diego says, economic shot in the foot. When they imposed tariffs onto us, they hurt Brazilian steel, they hurt their own coal and exports and exported products that utilize this steel. So it is clear and evident that this economic advisor in Brazil from the National Trade Association is a bit upset with the installation of the tariffs. Next up, we also have South Korean President Moon Jae, and he believes that it's created a negative impact on South Korean relations globally. And South Korea being the third largest exporter of steel to the United States, it will create a tremendous impact on their growing economy. Lastly, the Chinese, and most significantly, Xi Jinping, sorry if I'm butchering that name, he has reported to state that it has created thousands upon millions of jobs prior to the installation of the tariff, which created a 375 billion trade surplus for the Chinese prior to installation. So the Chinese are going to experience significant decline with this installation. Next up, we have the responses from Canada and Mexico. Real quick, bottom left, we have a chart of the top 10 U.S. steel import sources, Canada being the first. Trump has stated that his NAFTA relations need to be improved, and this is extremely significant with the U.S. steel import and the imports that are here. We have Canada, Brazil, South Korea, Russia, Mexico, Turkey, Japan, Taiwan, Germany, and India. Canada is extremely significant in the conversation. They exported 90% of steel to the U.S. and makes up 16% of the U.S. industry as far as the market total. Next up, we have another significant fact which contributes to the main conversation of the tariff installation. The Canadians account for 41% of U.S. aluminum imports, which have created tensions along with this installation of the tariff. Jean Simard, the Aluminum Association of Canada, has stated a pretty important comment on the installation of the tariff by President Trump, and has stated, whose industries, 9 smelters export 5.6 billion across the border every year, it was very difficult to accept the tariff. So Jean Simard, Associate, is extremely upset on this. Next up, Trudeau, the Prime Minister of Canada, has stated, it has created millions of jobs on both sides of the border and has benefited companies, workers, and individuals across America. However, the installation of the tax on lumber imports and steel and aluminum products will create grower tensions. Next up, Mexico. There's been a lot of retaliation to the tariff, along with the main speaker in Mexico, Ildefonso Guajardo, and they have planned to fight back with the installation of the tariff on U.S. taxation. They want to basically tax U.S. imported goods going back and forth in between the United States and Mexico with the response. Next up, we have the Trade Expansion Act of 1962. It's actually very significant to this modern day current event. It has to do with the United States relations with imports and exports globally and how they communicate in a global perspective. And many politicians have stated that Trump has gone against this Trade Expansion Act and has acted against it. So keep that in the back of your head next time.
So what will be the European countermeasures? Well, the EU, or European countries, are the second largest steel and aluminum provider for the United States. And European countries have said that they will target U.S. exports to the United States, or from the U.S. to European countries. They seek $3.4 billion in compensation, and they will do this by enforcing 25% tariffs on different exports such as motorcycles, fruits, clothing, bourbon, and other products. Europe says that they stand ready to swiftly respond to any U.S. restrictive trade measures, and it really depends. It's going to vary from country to country, as Trump has stated that he will exempt NATO countries that are paying the bills, quote unquote, which we will see. And then also, how will Asian countries such as China and Japan retaliate to the tariffs? China similarly plans to impose 15 to 25% tariffs on U.S. exports. They're targeting 125 or 128 products, including wine, pork, fruits, nuts, and steel pipes, airplane materials, among other products. And China is a huge trade partner for U.S. agriculture, like I mentioned before. We have last year alone we sent $20 billion worth of agricultural products to China, and 1.1 billion made up the most of pork. And China's president warns Trump of taking this kind of Cold War mentality, as Trump seeks to minimize the $375 billion trade deficit we have with China. And going on to Japan, they're currently looking for tariff exemption and want to stay neutral and do not want to hurt the trade partnership in the future. But similarly to some European countries, they look to take measures if need be.
So how is this affecting companies negatively? For a lot of these companies, they need steel and aluminum to produce all of their products. And in general, this will affect the buyers. So instead of helping the people, it will actually end up costing them more. For example, in construction and architecture firms, for building houses, that will increase the prices. And in an already difficult market for purchasing houses, this will only affect the market even more negatively than before. And one company that will be largely affected is the beer industry in terms of aluminum cans. That will affect many companies, not just the beer industry, but mainly them, because their products are largely sold in aluminum cans, so that will have a downside. And the cost of raw materials, it's going to go up. So when buyers need to go and purchase things, they will also be affected by this. In a positive way, the U.S. steel industry is happy. As you mentioned, there is some states that do produce a lot of steel, so they will have a positive impact by this, and that is why some Democrats are in favor of this. Republicans have spoken out saying how they aren't 100% for this trade tariff. And companies that have spoken out have been Ford, General Motors, U.S. Travel Association, and the Aluminum Association. Mainly a lot of the people speaking out have said negative things. They're worried that the tariff will make buyers buy less and affect them negatively as well, since they will have to pay more for these products. But we do have people that have spoken out in a positive light. For example, the U.S. aluminum industry actually thinks it will even out the playing field because they will have more of an advantage in this situation.
To conclude, we'd like to address to you a summary statement of our belief system on tariffs. Although the installation of a tariff can help establish a strong domestic industrial base, we believe that a tariff on steel and aluminum will negatively affect steel and aluminum consumers in the United States. Based on historical occurrences, the world has faced adverse outcomes with the installation of tariffs. In 2002, the development of the U.S. illustrated tariff under President Bush altered the course of decisions and stimulated negative outcome for growing businesses in the millennial age. The current situation will aim to provide Americans with domestic advantages. However, the infrastructure of the global market share for aluminum and steel products will negatively affect U.S. consumers and producers. We'd like to open up the floor for questions.
Great. Who wants to start?
What are the opinions of political leaders in the tariff dispute?
So some of the political leaders, for example, the Democrats, in the states that they do have production of steel, they were quite happy with that because it will help them out producing jobs and it'll help their overall economy in those specific states. But for Republicans, they had spoken with the president and shown their not exact opposition, because they haven't come out and said they're opposed to it, but they have shown that they aren't 100% on board with the decisions he's made. So the Republicans aren't as happy about this decision as some Democrats are.
Next question.
Okay. Which U.S. industry will suffer the harshest backlash from tariffs?
Did you hear the question? Okay.
Yeah. The slides I talked about, the ones that will mainly be affected will be the one producing products for building houses. They will also affect the beer industry, or mainly anything that needs aluminum for aluminum cans and their products. Another one that will be largely affected is car production. Ford Motors and a lot of those big companies that are based in the U.S. will take a big hit because of the products having a rise, and cars are all steel and aluminum, so that will really affect them negatively.
I'll add on that. Anyone that was producing out of the country is now has to buy from domestic sources. We'll get hurt from that.
Next question.
How do companies expect to benefit from the trade tariffs?
That was also my side. They will benefit from this. For example, steel. We do have states that produce steel and their production will rise. And since this is trying to focus on making everyone purchase from U.S. producers and buy domestic products, it will hopefully help us by making everyone purchase domestically and balance out the playing field.
It'll allow domestic or American companies to raise prices. So the tariff's going to increase buying from other countries. So it helps American companies by they can increase their prices to meet that while still being below the international price.
Okay. We have 3 more questions. Anyway.
Have any companies changed their minds about the new trade tariff? Did any switch from being pro to con?
As of now, there have not been specific comments switching from one side to the other, but there have been people, for example, political leaders, who have spoken out saying they are against it now, or there have actually been some that have looked more into it and have come out supporting it. But as of companies, no one's really switched sides on it yet.
And then, Austin, you had one question? Go ahead.
What other countries will become the main trade partners with Europe and Asia if higher tariffs will be placed on U.S. farmers' exports?
There's gonna be more trade with like South American countries for agricultural, produce, such as Peru, for wine, just South America and maybe, even like Central America as well, where it's more tropical agriculture.
We get all our questions in? Oh, Courtney, one more question.
What brands have been negatively affected?
Well, immediately we saw Boeing was negatively affected. Any big companies that require, or that produce in other countries. As Anna mentioned, a lot of the beer companies, anyone that produce outside the country.
We also forgot to mention appliance companies, companies that produce refrigerators, anything that is basis with steel. Kitchen appliances will definitely be shifted, especially the market with LG and Electrolux.
They're negatively affected, but they don't really have a choice, because they have to. That's why I say it might not be as bad as it seems, because everyone's gonna have to pay prices anyway. So it's not like there's gonna be winners and losers. I mean, it's either gonna be, we'll all go down or all go, or it's gonna be fine. It's not gonna be a big shift, and the economy's either gonna take a big hit from it, or it's gonna stay stable. Which is what we saw in 2002, is kind of a big hit from it, which is why it lifted the tariffs a couple years after.
Great job, guys. Thank you.